welcome everybody. So we're here for a AI and FinTech security discussion. First, let's go ahead and kick off a little bit of introduction of our esteemed panelists. Stephen, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Stephen Scharf. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for BlackRock.
Sunil, we'll let you go next.
Thanks, Caleb. Thanks for having me here. I'm Sunil Malik, and I lead the product and platform security teams at Discover. When I say that, it's AppSec, cloud security, red team, ethical hacking, and vulnerability management.
Bedra, you next.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Caleb, and everybody. It's a pleasure. Upendra Madikar. I'm a global CISO and head of fraud management for TIAA. We manage $1.4 trillion asset under management, primarily focusing on educational institutions and participants over there. So,
okay. Thank you. So we're here to talk about the hot topic, of course, is AI. And specifically, you guys are all experts, and myself previously, I guess you could say an expert in the fintech space. And so really, it's going to be about how is fintech adopting AI and some of the challenges that are coming with it. And I'd also love to kind of encourage a little bit at the beginning here around we're going to start off sort of focusing on, hey, how is the financial industry really rolling out AI and what are some of the things and challenges about it? But also, I really want to tackle what are the positives that we also believe AI is adding both from a safety and risk perspective. And it's not just about the fear, but also about how it's enabling the business and how it's enabling even safety and cybersecurity as well. So I'll start with the first question, which is, what is security's role in safe adoption of Gen AI?
Yeah, I think security definitely has a role to play, and in my view, the role is to be the enabler, right? When I say that, right, AI and ML has been here for a long time. With the introduction of generative AI, there are a unique set of threats or risks that apply to the adoption, and security's role is to be the trusted advisor to the business and guide them through safe adoption, right? By kind of defining those guardrails as well as educating them on what are the right controls and how to approach the risks that are unique to. I'm talking generative AI specifically, but AI, ML in general.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. So from TIAA's perspective, TIAA has always been using AI for generations. Of course, it's in its different forms. What happened, Caleb and team, is that with the advent of Gen AI, the focus on AI, really skyrocketed. So it became more like an exponential function of the focus of AI on AI. So what we did was we immediately, cross-functionally, the first line, second line, third line, along with our chief data and AI officer and legal and risk and compliance, we came together and we said that, hey, what are the controls from the AI perspective that we can put? So we actually put it in two buckets. The first bucket that we put is cyber for AI. So what that means is, what can the cyber controls be if the rest of the business units, rest of the organizations, and TIA grew both organically as well as inorganically. That means that we had lots of subsidiaries included in this conglomerate, if you will. So what are the cyber controls that we can put for the AI initiatives happening across TIA and its ecosystem? The second thing that we did was, how can we start using AI for cyber? So the role of security and fraud management organization Of course, we continued to focus on AI, but it really exponentially grew with the advent of Gen AI. And then we immediately started creating two groups, Cyber for AI, AI for Cyber, with responsible, trustworthy, and secure AI.
Yeah.
So I think, Caleb, you had mentioned in your introduction, I mean, there's many angles that we have to look at, and I'm sure we'll discuss a bunch of them on this meeting here. Specifically, what is security's role in AI? At least, how are you protecting your firms, and what are you thinking about? I agree we have to be enablers, but I also think it's our job to help articulate what is the real risk. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of emotions that are running around with generative AI. Some of them are spot on and some of them are just not accurate. So I think it's hard to protect something if you don't really understand where the problem sets are. And so I think part of security's job is education and explaining what could go wrong, what can't go wrong, what do we really need to protect, what don't we need to protect, and bringing some clarity to that. I think that's critically important, just given how much fervor there is around folks wanting to use Gen AI and how it's going in many different ways. And then I'll give the standard consulting answer, which is this is just yet another transformational type of technology thing we're living through. And it's got a lot of different angles that maybe haven't existed before, but we've done this before. There's been new tech that's come out that hasn't been widely understood. We need to understand it, and then we need to build a security function around it. And so I think that's kind of the initial phase that security teams are looking at.
Can I push you a little bit on that?
Yeah, please.
How did you get to understand? How did you get your grip to understand what is a misconception versus what's not a misconception?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is that people thought it was an entirely security-focused problem on how you use Gen AI safely. And that's just not true. It's a shared responsibility, actually more so within legal and compliance sometimes than it is within security. Because how you're protecting the data and ensuring that you don't have data leakage, while that does have security components, it also has legal and compliance components. If you're using generative AI to, let's say, enhance your code base, you run risks of how you can protect your code in the future. That's not a security problem per se. That's a legal problem. And so I think people who just ran at it and said, oh, it's a security concern, and as long as we solve the security problems, we're good. That's a mistake. There are multiple layers of problems that need to be solved to do this safely.
I actually have one that kind of rings true with is, I was talking with a few other CISOs as well, and one thing they mentioned is as Gen AI was being pushed, they were getting talked to around safety and ethics and the behavior of AI, specifically example B, we're going to put out this chat bot for customer support. How do, now this chat bot is producing illicit content, is misbehaving, doesn't have the right ethics. And then it sort of fell in the CISO's lap. And as a role, it almost, there's this debate around, is this really a product management or engineering problem versus a cybersecurity problem, right? Is it really now our job from a security perspective to ensure that the product behaves in the right way, or is this really a PM engineering position? Have you guys run into that at all?
Yeah, we have. Sorry, Sunil, you were about to say something. Please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So there was a CSMA CD over there. So Caleb, you're right. We went through this. The model that we use is a 3-layered model. So what are the foundational, for example, elements, infrastructure-wise, the network-wise, the data-wise, as to how do you make sure that the models, the enterprise AI platform that we are building, those have those foundational elements that are secure with proper access control, the regular stuff that we do as cyber professionals. The second layer there are some use cases that are being built on the top of those particular platforms. And the third layer is what are the usages, if you will, on those things. Like, for example, you talked about the chatbots. the advisors, the other kind of, there are multiple use cases. So that is the three-layered model that we talked about. It's very easy for all of us to put the controls on the foundational layers, on the model as well. We talked about cyber for AI and AI for cyber. And on the use cases, we had those discussions with the appropriate legal parties, the compliance team, the risk team, the hallucinations. What happens if there is hallucinations? Do we go with rags? All those kinds of conversations we went through. And then, it's still work in progress, but there is a RACI model getting evolved as we speak.
Yeah, so Neil, you are having a comment, yeah. Go right ahead.
Sure. I think just to expand on what Upendra said, right? Like the way we approached it, first, we defined a process for intake, right? How do we identify use cases that have the right outcomes for the organization, and how we assess those use cases, right? And that's where, just like our TIA's approach, Discover has a generative AI council that is cross-represented, business, compliance, audit, legal, security, architecture, right? So we brought those use cases to be reviewed and assessed in a cross-functional forum, right? With certain guardrails. And when I talk about the guardrail, we primarily align to the NIST AI risk management framework. I know it is at a very high level, but what that helped us is to frame those conversations around assessing the risk of a specific use cases using the framework, right? And then we were very deliberate that we don't call this cross-functional group a governance group, right? Because if you think about it, right, even before AI, I think Stephen made that point. We have dealt with new technologies, right? We have dealt with technologies that pose new risks, right? And we have a process to address those risks. When I say that, we have a technology governance function. We already had a model governance function. We have a third-party risk management governance function. So what we did is deliberately is to, what are the additional tweaks, right, or considerations we need to build into the existing governance processes to deal with incoming AI use cases. That's the approach we took. On the control side, right, we at a minimum, right, being a financially being a regulated company, right, and a financial services company, we always need to have a way to respond to our regulators' audit, right, on what are the relevant risks and what controls we have put in place, right? So we created that mapping between the risk and controls as well as the operating model, right? I think that's the point Upendra was making, right? You need to have a clear RACI on how the risk is being treated across the life cycle of the product. We are still learning. I think Upendra made the point, right? We are still learning on how to evolve and how to refine the model, but that's the approach we took.
Yeah, I would also say that for those of us who, and obviously everyone on the call is on financial services, but I know everyone listening to the call might not be in financial services. But model validation has been around for a very long time. Like we're not starting from ground zero. Like in financial services, we've been doing model validation for a long time. Now, granted, those were models that firms own, created mostly around financial predictions. This is a different type of application of the model, and sometimes it's not your model, it's someone else's model. But those core functions and those core things that you've already built are very applicable to rolling that into at least getting started on how you look at generative AI model validation.
But one of the things that I was curious in sort of that initial question is that been largely the role of the cybersecurity team to do model validation in the past? Because generally I'm starting to see that, they are looking to, because, safety is now kind of falling into the lap of the CISO, when in general, I've not really seen that, right? Where especially the sort of ethics behavior perspective.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been that financial model validation tends to be in the financial risk department, and that is usually separate from the CISO department.
Yeah.
And Caleb, when you say safety, right?
Go ahead, Sunil. Yeah.
When you say safety, that translates to primarily in financial services companies to consumer harm, right? And we do have, even in the model risk space, right? We have built-in processes to ensure that we are kind of, like the Fair Lending Act is one example, right? That we are complying with those laws and regulations, right? And ensuring that we are not causing that harm to our customers.
Is there anything specific around a financial institution and managing risk around AI than any other institution? Like for you guys, what really, what's the difference? When you look at that difference between, well, if I were in a financial institution, I wouldn't have to do this in AI. Do you think there is one?
I think when it comes to safety, it will translate to like different things across different industries, right? For example, like say a transportation company, right? I think safety will translate. It will have a very different meaning there, right? Within financial services companies, I think it's primarily revolved around consumers, right? And how we kind of comply with the applicable laws and regulations and protect our customers. Sorry, if someone else is
Yeah,
saying something.
I think every industry and every firm has its own risk profile and its own risk tolerances. And I think that's applicable to how they adopt lots of different technologies. Gen AI would be one of them. So I think some industries, they might have lower tolerances. I think they might be a little bit more comfortable with moving faster and taking greater advantage of things that Gen AI could deliver, understanding that there are some downsides to that as well. Whereas I think more heavily regulated industries, I think where there's less tolerance for risk being present, you're going to operate in a slightly different model. But I don't think that that's specific to Gen AI. I think that's specific to the industries we operate in and the overlapping expectations that are in place.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you, Stephen. But I also like Sunil's point because the definition of safety changes. What do you consider as safe? I mean, typically, and Caleb, your question is very profound over there. As we think about cyber security and pivoting more towards safety, if you will. So we obviously people are looking at us to create a trustworthy platform and secure platform. The transition that is happening is going from security to safety. Now, more and more onus is coming on cyber professionals for that transition from security. So I really appreciate the question. And when I think more about that question, is there any difference between the finances and other industries? I think the general principles from security to safety transition will remain the same. The controls, the processes, and the way we will implement will change, but the general principles will continue to be the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I see there's definitely a trend in some industries where you have the chief trust officer, and that's happening more frequently. That didn't happen before. I don't know of any chief trust officer in financial services. I just know in other industries. That doesn't mean that trust is any less important in financial services. I think the industry just hasn't decided that a trust officer type function is the right model, and maybe organically it will happen if the attitudes change.
Yeah, the other question is, what is the difference between a chief trust officer versus a CISO versus a chief security officer versus I've even heard sort of chief safety officers starting to get rumored going back to the safety. Like, the titles are different, but is it just a branding exercise? Versus like, is there any real distinction between the role because that name changes?
All right, so this is my fourth gig as a CISO / CSO, and I would say, and there's no standard definition, but in my opinion, a CSO tends to cover multiple pillars. It has the cyber and infosec, it also has the physical, it has the business continuity, it has crisis management, has all those things rolled together. In some firms, the CSO is just physical or just crisis. So that even varies a little bit. Whereas the CISO, I think, tends to be a pure play infosec cyber function. I think when you get to the chief trust officer, that's rolling in privacy and it's rolling in other elements that exist in other parts of the organization to try to have a more holistic commentary and roll up into one function.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just trying to share my perspective on that difference. The role has evolved. I mean, we all have been in the security industry for quite some time now. the role of a CISO from being just a head of IT, if you will, or managing some system configurations and firewalls and routers, to now, really having conversations with customers and clients and really enforcing that message of cybersecurity. What has happened in my experience and opinion is that how can we say that our platforms are not only secure, but you are instilling trust and making it trustworthy, essentially, the platform itself where you are working on, be it your website, be it your credit cards, whatever your business function is really trustworthy. And it's safe for our clients and customers to operate in, so that the trust that they are putting in ourselves, we actually are complying to that particular trust. So that is the evolution of CISO that is happening. But I completely agree. There is a chief privacy officer that takes care of the regulations. There are multiple laws and regulations, especially for global organizations. So that's where the privacy officer is primarily focused on.
Okay, great. I'll bring us back on the AI track and ask sort of one question before I switch more on this. We're about protection and defense and go maybe a little bit more in the positive. And I'd love to get some of your experiences on that. But the final one I would say in there is, what have you found to be the most practical thing that you've put in place today to help the business adopt AI, right? And when I say practical, I mean, this is something hopefully that the viewers of this can say, oh, that is something I can probably go back and implement now, right? Like, was it building a board or a process or even a technology or hiring, even a certain type of consultant or advisor? Just what do you think is the most practical?
I mean, for me, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is the same thing that Sunil had mentioned, which is having a cross collaboration group come together to actually discuss this, so that as new projects are proposed within the firm, and as folks want to go down this path, we can have a comprehensive conversation and really understand across the different groups what the risk is, what the benefit is, and make some intelligent decisions. I think if it was done in silos, that would be much more difficult to manage, and it would be hard to overlay the governance on top of that. So that to me was kind of the most beneficial first step in going down some of these paths.
And is this basically like saying every AI project moving forward and using AI should be presented at sort of this cross-functional group that was created and approved?
For us, it is, yes.
For us, we did have I can touch upon it, right? A governance process for AI ML existing, because we have been playing in that field for a long time, right? So we kind of narrowed the focus of this group to sit only generative AI.
Gen AI, yeah. But similar aspects, yeah.
Yeah, so very similar. So what happened was we took, in addition to whatever Sunil and Stephen was talking about, that there is AI governance, data governance kind of approach that we immediately instilled. But the way we looked at it was more of an opportunity than as a risk. And what I mean by that is, historically, we all know that security was bolted in. IP came in first and then IPsec. TCP came in first and then came SSL, TLS, right? So this is our opportunity as to how can we go and shift extreme left and potentially up by talking to our business colleagues and really baking in threat model, embedding threat models as it relates to AIs and / Gen AI particularly. And you are right, Sunil, that AI has been happening earlier, but specifically for Gen AI, how do we go shift left to the extreme left over here? So that's how we see this as an opportunity as cyber professionals across the industry to embed. So the practical thing, Caleb, from my point of view is Like Stephen said, make sure that we coordinate across the organization, step number one. And step number one, use this as an opportunity to shift left as much as possible.
Have you
The
guys
only thing I would
felt?
add, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only other thing I would add is, and we are still working through this, right, is that creating a test and learn environment where we can experiment safely, right, and conclude on this the Gen AI technology. Because there is like a lot of excitement, right? Every business unit, even on an individual basis, right, your employees are excited, right, to they get their hands on it, right, and try something new, right? So creating that rapid test and learn environment is something that we are working through. But I think that will help the organization to really look at like what are the relevant risks, right? And what are the outcomes we are going to get before we embark on productionalizing those, right? I think that's one area we are working on. We are not there yet, but that has been one of the focus.
Have you guys had regulators pushing and asking around this? And what do they ask? What's sort of the things they're expecting from you?
I can go first. I think, yes, they are asking. Again, I think there is still a little bit of, I would say, lack of clarity, right? AI, ML versus generative AI. And this has been typical with like any other new technology, right? As we are learning, they're learning too. I think one thing they're starting with is like, what is your process for getting these technologies in and assessing them before you put them in production? And then the other thing is the inventory, right? Do you have a source of truth for all the processes and applications where you are using AI or generative AI?
Yeah.
I will leave.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would just say that I know in most places of financial services, no one is comfortable at this point to allow the machine to make decisions that are then acted upon. So, I think as that comfort changes and as the tech evolves, I think that will bring in more focus from a regulatory community and others. But I do think when you look at all critical decision-making, critical paths, Gen AI is not playing into that space. It's still very early stages. So I think the discussions are more inquisitive and exploratory. Because firms are not at the point of evolving to where they're allowing the Gen AI to act on its own.
Okay, I'll flip the script on you guys. When you think about what are the positives that AI is going to bring to you as CISOs?
I mean, I can, maybe I'm repeating myself. So the way I was thinking about it, and I don't know what is the best analogy over here, Caleb, but I will still use it. It's not good to fight with bows and arrows against, AK-47s or guns and big missiles, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is that with this, and I don't know if there is a good analogy over here, so pardon me if I'm going extreme over here, but this, empowers, AI technology in general. And none of us are, this is not a new technology for any one of us. So we have been using AI in our previous lives as well. So what Gen AI and technologies have really helped us to focus on, first of all, helping our, SOC, helping our cyber professionals to do their jobs more efficiently. So there is an efficiency play, if you will. There are new threats, scalability, if you will, that we will be able to detect that were not previously we were able to detect. And then on the protection side, we are still, and we continue on that journey, we will continue to use AI for protection as well. So it's the whole gamut, essentially. That's where I can see, how Gen AI and other technologies continue to help cyber professionals identify, protect, detect on those kinds of threats.
Yeah. I've got one. I'll contribute as opposed to just always asking questions as well. I think the SOC one is a big one. When you look at, to not get into FUD, but a little bit like the attackers are now enabling themselves with AI, right? We are seeing the effects of that through deep fakes, through much more advanced phishing. It's, obviously the low hanging fruit is getting lower because of their ability to use this. But when I think about some of the positives, if we can start equipping sort of, Upendra, like you said, the SOC with AI foot soldiers themselves, right, where everyone struggles with sort of just a lower tier alerting system. And the biggest issue is not that these alerts are, quote, false positives. It's just that the alerts have to be investigated to really determine whether they are indicators of a real threat or attack, or they're just the normal day-to-day parts of the business, right? Like, I was just talking with someone earlier about how things like, a user or an employee failed their logins multiple times, right? Which, by the way, happens in any large organization, like hundreds of times a week or even a day, depending on how you're doing this. And then it's like, well, then how do you know whether this is just a signal of an attack or this is a signal of an employee, just normally doing it? You have to have an investigation. You have to say, oh, like, did the employee does they do this all the time? Do they have a history of it? Do you just Slack the employee or message the employee and say, hey, did you fail this login multiple times? AI can all of a sudden start really coming in and having smart conversations with employees. AI can start really going and chasing down and doing the investigations automatically. And I think starting to enable our teams to take these tier one types of alerts, not that they're false positive, but truly determine whether there's real meaning to it, I think are making real headway. And it'll be exciting to see, in the next couple of years, how we start getting these AI foot soldiers on our end and the kinds of jobs that they start.
You're right, Caleb. Let me add to that. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this area, and that is something that you like. So one of the things is, when we went on this journey, what we found out was finding those false positives and, the true negatives and all those kinds of false positives, that overall truth table, it becomes a little bit difficult for us. So what we did was, I really am a firm believer of attention is all you need. I'm sure, many of you have read that paper and, lived that. But I will highly encourage, in terms of practical implementation to all the listeners, is to read that paper and, see if you want to use that while you are experimenting with all these.
Yeah, we in our team, we had a hack fest, and our AppSec team specifically did a little bit of POC with just doing vulnerability remediation PRs using our AI model, and it worked phenomenally well. And that's just like 3 to 4 weeks of building a prototype. And we were able to hand over and submit to the engineers things that were vulnerabilities with actual PRs that worked remarkably well. And the experience for the engineers went up quite a bit. And this is just something that normally I would have said 2 years ago would have taken a massive engineering team to go build, probably with a lot of false positives with it. Now takes a team of like 3 weeks to go build something that actually is workable. Steven, I think you were going to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities around security orchestration and trying to streamline some of the existing processes and make them more efficient. To me, it's where does this go with behavioral and predictive analytics? We for a long time, we've seen products that have moved, the needle a little bit, but they haven't solved the problem. And when you're at a point where you can train the models on all of your own activity, all of your own data, and then you start to look for patterns and then try to build the predictive triggers from those patterns. That to me is where it gets really exciting, because so much of our job is responding to the bad thing that happened. We really want to get to the other side of it, of identifying the bad thing before it happens.
Yeah.
And then that's where we really flip the script a bit.
So we need some pre-cybercrime. Yeah, can we predict the cybercrime before it occurs? Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Caleb, to your point, right? I think you had a very good use case, right? But let's think about like 2 years back when Log4j response, right? If we had all our data sources, right, that the LLM could learn from, right? And we query a condition, right? And get a response on where our exposure is and how we can prioritize it across different teams, right? And when I said different teams, I'm talking about like the threat intel analyst versus the vulnerability analyst, the AppSec analyst, and then your response analyst, right? If they can go to the same source, right, and through conversational querying, right, input a condition and get a response, that will be huge, right? It will take some time to build build a data store like that, but I think those opportunities are definitely there because we have when I say, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, what it's like we have different ways of like putting these query conditions and getting our response, but when it becomes conversational, I think we have an opportunity to make bring in some standardization, right, and correlate these responses.
Yeah, so if you look at the broader employment problem, right, there's been millions of unfilled security jobs. There's not enough people that are trained in certain areas to be as effective as we want them to be. That doesn't seem to be solving anytime soon. If you can lower the bar where you can make people effective, but not have to have that high level of capabilities and maturity, like to me, I think about like a product called like Tanium, right? Where you could just do basic queries to get back significant answers, and now do that across your entire estate, where you're able to have someone in the SOC who is investigating a problem and can ask in simple English, and then get back a sophisticated answer, and not have to learn how to write a bunch of Perl scripts or Python code in order to do the same thing.
Yeah, then they can be truly talented from an analytical, investigative perspective, but not have to have the technical know-how to do it.
Now there is the reverse of that, which is a concern, which is people become less understanding and informed on what's happening under the covers. Yeah. And if you allow the machine to do too much of the coding, no one knows how the coding works. So there's that trade-off that you have to make sure you have the right balance on.
Yeah. Really good points. But it's, one of the things I've always thought of too is when you look at prompt engineering or writing good prompts for these Gen AI models, I've always thought like all you have to go look at elementary school teachers. They have a phenomenal new job as prompt engineers, because that's exactly what makes good prompts, is telling them exactly what you need, how you want it, and the way that you want it. In English, go to the bathroom, but do not go play at the playground. Well, on your way to the bathroom, come directly back to class. That's how prompt engineering is today. But I think it opens up whole new jobs and opportunities that I do think, today it does require that technical knowledge, and tomorrow it probably won't. Any other thoughts on positivity? I like the positive spin on this, and we'll do it sort of one final question, one round, and then we'll close up.
And I will give a very kind of simple answer. Like anytime there is a disruption or a new technology comes in that brings business, cyber, technologists, architects, legal, compliance together, it's an opportunity, right? Because that gives us that platform, right, to talk about security, cyber risk, good hygiene practices. Like I'll tell you, like the companies that are really going to be successful in adopting Gen AI faster are the companies that had good data governance practices before, right? The foundational things that we have been kind of talking about, if they had that in place, there will be a faster adoption. So this is an opportunity like that, right, where we have a voice, and we have a voice in front of a cross-functional group, right? And that's an opportunity for cyber.
Another thing I was thinking, in addition to whatever has been discussed in terms of use of AI and identify, protect, detect, recover, respond, and all that, I personally am very passionate about cyber as a community sport. So what that means is that we who are in security profession, I think forums like this, we should start collaborating more, and Gen AI can be potentially effectively used. So that's an opportunity for us to collaborate. And I know CSA and under Caleb's leadership is doing a phenomenal job on responsible AI. So bringing all these people together to really form a very strong community, and cyber being a community sport, I think this is our time. We are at an inflection point in AI where cyber can really get ahead of the game and then bake in security instead of bolting in security.
like I wish for that world as well. I was just, it's a whole nother discussion. But I feel like we get in our own way from having that world come true, where, at the end of the day, the ability for us to share the true problems and challenges that we have in our organizations that we deal with is very difficult to do. And hopefully, maybe AI does help enable the ability for us to communicate that in a way that is safe for our organizations, the risk of our companies, and perhaps in a very safe, anonymized way where we can all gain that level of knowledge, but at the same time, not to have to give up sort of the risks of the business. That would be a really interesting challenge. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap up? Stephen, I'll go to you. I'll call you guys out independently.
Well, I think we covered a lot of good topics, and for me, just I think of AI for good and AI for evil, and then AI for ignorance. And so, I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity that exists, and even folks that I've talked to say that this is potentially the most transformational technology that they've seen in their lifetimes. Like I think there's such an opportunity here, and we can seriously screw it up if security is not done the right way. So, I think it's a heavy burden on the security functions across all the different companies to make sure that they're partnering effectively, that they're rolling out the right controls, they're asking for help, they're learning as much as they can. But there could be so much technical debt if you get this wrong that going back and cleaning things up is going to be almost impossible. So, I think it's critical if security firms or security teams are not actively engaged in this. I promise you that there's a part of your organization that's actively looking at generative AI and thinking of products that they want to bring to market. And if you're not involved with that conversation, then that's a problem. So, like I would just kind of echo the call to arms for all of our peers and say, get involved and don't think that things are happening if you're not aware of them.
100%. Sunil.
I will echo some of the points. I think we have to lead from the front, right? And we're seeing that, like even at Discover, right? We are playing a role where we are leaders, right, and collaborating and bringing the right groups together on the table and leading this conversation, right? And I think this is a great opportunity for us. But I'll echo the things that Stephen said. We have to build the right guardrails, right controls, and things that we have been saying for a long time, right? And going back to the fundamentals, like confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? We have to make that strong. We have to get our foundation strong to help us adopt these technologies faster. And if Stephen touched upon it as well, right? If we know there are known gaps in those processes, we have to address them, right? If we want the speed of adoption that we are looking for.
Great. And then last but not least.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. There are definite promises and there are definite perils with AI. And the industry, I would say the entire planet is at the inflection point because of this technology. It is going to touch not only those who have fintech as their customers, but each and every part of our life is going to get touched with AI and Gen AI. I think this for us cyber professionals, baking in security, trustworthiness, the safety, whatever we talked about, and really coming together as community is just need of this hour. So security as a community sport, which I firmly believe in. And I'm so glad, Caleb, that you are leading this movement, with your CSA role, and applaud you and others for that, and would like to participate in those. But, fantastic opportunity for us to start baking in security in this wonderful technology.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for hopping on and joining the call. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.